Okay, chapter 10, day 1 for our notes for chapter 10. And what this chapter is this chapter is going to look at observations and experiments. And we start looking at what are the components of those. So the first thing we need to talk about is kind of the difference between observations and experiments. Observational study is when you observe the subjects and no treatment is given. You might observe looking at medical records. You might observe just watching what the subjects are doing, but you do not provide any kind of treatment or manipulation at all. You're just watching. There are two basic types of observational studies. The first type is retrospective, looking into the past. So you identify the subjects and then you look at past behaviors, hence the word retro. So you identify people, let's say, with lung cancer, and then you look at past behaviors. Did you smoke? Did you work in a dirty environment? What did you eat? But you identify subjects for whatever the reason is, and then you look into their past. That's retrospective. The other type is called prospective. And in a prospective, you still identify who you're going to study, but now you follow them into the future. So you might identify healthy 25-year-olds, and then you watch in the future what happens to them, maybe based on what they eat, where they live, anything like that. So prospective, you identify, and then you follow them. Follow them into the future could be following them just for a day, but you're not looking at past behaviors. You're just starting now and looking at what's ahead going forward. An experiment, though, gives some form of a treatment, all right? Some form of manipulation in an experiment. So you're giving a treatment to the subjects. The only way to show a cause and effect relationship is to do a controlled experiment. We can only speculate unless we do an experiment. If we do an experiment, that's the only way we can show some sort of cause and effect relationship. And it has to be a controlled experiment. So, some of the pieces of this controlled experiment. We have one variable called the explanatory variable. It is the input. It is used to determine the result. It's what you are giving to the subject. So the explanatory variable is what you're doing to them. It's what you're giving them. It's how you're manipulating them. It is the variable that you are trying to test out. The explanatory. The response, think about it, a response is what you give after you've heard information. The response variable is the output that we are measuring and comparing. So once we have manipulated the subject, we then look at the response that we get, and that response variable is this output that we're measuring. So, some more vocabulary. Factors. The factors is another name for this explanatory variable in the experiment. It is what is being inputted. So those things being inputted, we call them factors. They are the factors of the study. Levels are the different values then of each factor. What are the different levels of whatever we're manipulating them with? And the experimental unit is who or what the experiment is being done on. If they're people, we call them subjects in general. But it's the unit, experimental unit is who or what this experiment is being done on. Because it isn't always people. It's everything. Okay, so let's take a look at a scenario. Let's say I wanted to design an experiment to test the breathing rate of fish at 50 and 60 degree temperature of water, and I'm going to have high, medium, and low salt levels. So think about it. I have fish tanks, and in these fish tanks, I'm going to change the temperatures and the salt levels, and I want to look at the breathing rates of the fish, how frequently they breathe. So, my experimental unit here, who or what we're doing the test on, is the fish. That's who we're doing this test on, is the fish. My factors. Well, I have two factors, temperature and salt. Those are the things that we're manipulating, the things that we're inputting into those fish. Change in temperatures, change in salts. So two factors, temperature and salt. Now, levels. How many levels of temperature? We have two levels of temperature, 50 and 60. How many levels of salt? 3, high, medium, and low. So we have 2 levels of temp and 3 levels of salt. If I were to conduct this experiment, I would need 6 fish tanks. Because for the 50 degree fish tank, I'm going to put a high, medium, and low salt in 3 separate tanks. And for the 60 degree temperature, I'm going to put a high, medium, and low in 3 separate tanks. So I have 6 total treatments. 50 degrees with high, medium, and low salt, 60 degrees, high, medium, low. I have six total treatments, 6 total fish tanks, 6 total treatments. Now, the explanatory variable then, in this case, is what am I inputting? I'm inputting temperature and salt. The response that I'm measuring is the breathing of the fish. So, the explanatory variable is the temperature and the salt, and the response is the breathing rate of the fish. And that's the beginnings of working with experiments.